Good morning, everyone. It is Wednesday, and I definitely missed you guys last week with it being Remembrance Day. So thank you so much for honoring all those who have supported for our freedom. And so I always take the day off on Remembrance Day, so thank you for understanding that we weren't here last week. But this week, I am here with Irene. And so Irene is a parenting coach for moms ready to reclaim herself, moms that are done with feeling overwhelmed, inadequate, exhausted, afraid of missing out on the joy of motherhood and never feeling good enough. She helps moms refocus their energy, rebuild their emotional toolbox, and learn to show up in their lives and relationships empowered and confident. And I love that. And so we're going to be talking about empowered motherhood and a journey back to you. So welcome, Irene.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here and chat today.
So how long have you been working with moms, like moms specifically? Because obviously you've probably been working with moms for a long time, but specifically in this particular area.
Yeah. So my journey into coaching was like 5 years ago. And I think I've always worked with moms, but how I worked with them evolved. So I started in health coaching and kind of life coaching and supporting in different ways. And then it was really focused on the parenting aspect, or I should say the child aspect of parenting. But as that evolved, it really came more into who we are as moms, how we're showing up as moms, and this disconnect that so many moms have between loving ourselves, compassion for ourselves, knowing kind of our story and being able to create that in our current circumstances, in the child's behavior, and kind of stepping into that and seeing that all of our overwhelm and our stress comes from trying to like fit into this box. So how I've supported moms and partnered with moms has shifted, but I think it's always been my passion or calling to work with moms specifically, because my whole journey into this began with my journey of motherhood and in a place where I was just not happy and couldn't figure out how to get happy, and thought I needed my kids to behave a certain way or my partner to do something versus how I could get to this place myself.
And it is so important because when we become moms, we lose ourselves, right? So just this week, I was having a session with somebody who, because we're doing some different work on being able to reclaim yourself and figuring out who you are and picking out that identity. And the particular person that I was talking to this week, she says, and I said, okay, well, who were you before you had kids, before you got married, right? And she's like, I don't know. I don't remember, like much different than I am now. And it's like, exactly, right? Because we tend to lose. We become, like you said, we become so focused on fitting into the patterns, fitting into the working mom or stay-at-home mom, or fitting into the role of professional mom. Like all these different things happen.
And also needing our children to check off those boxes of like a well-behaved child, or, a child that is showing up as kind of society tells us the child, which means I need to be that parent. And for so much of us as women, we've learned that our validation and our worth comes from outside of ourselves. And what better way to validate our job, our role as a mom, than by our child's behavior? And so we're so focused on controlling their behavior so that we get to feel a certain way as a mom, that we get stuck in all that. And then we're trying to play, like you said, all of these roles of working mom or stay-at-home mom or whatever the case may be, pouring everything into that, right? Because the memo has been, motherhood is give as much as I can, give everything I can, at the expense of me. Like that has been kind of the role model that so many of us have experienced. That we didn't learn how to set boundaries and show up for ourselves, so that we're still carrying that burden, that belief that this is the way motherhood is supposed to be. And we are crumbling under the pressure, under the stress.
Because it's difficult, right? So it's not easy becoming a mom. So, and I know that the dads that are out there are going to say, oh my God, seriously? What about us? Right? But the pressure is not the same for dads. And there are some dads that step up to the plate and they're the ones, and they do like equal share or they become single dads. And like, so kudos to them. And that's not what we're talking about. It's the general norm, right? So like, it's the moms that stay up in the middle of the night because the kids are sick. It's the mom, and both parents are working in most cases, right? So, but it's typically the mom that looks after all those different things. It's the mom that looks after all the things to do with school, typically, right? So, and you've got all these pressures. Then you've got, like, if you are, and if you are working, then you've got all these other things that are going on. So tell me a little bit more about your journey. So you said, like, this started with your journey. So
so my boys now are 8 and 9. So they're 15 months apart. So it was kind of crazy if we go there for a bit of time. And because I never learned how to set boundaries. I never learned to kind of take care of myself. Like, I'll say, like, I went 35 years without being called mom, and now I don't remember a time when I wasn't, right? But I had gone in the beginning, I was like giving everything I had and just crumbling under it. So I was not happy. I was, losing my patience all the time, not, crying behind the closed door saying, I can't do this. I don't know how to do this. My husband didn't know how to help me because I didn't know how to help me. I didn't know what to ask for. I didn't know what I needed. So he didn't know either. So then he would get angry and resentful because I was in this place, and it just was this hamster wheel every day of more of the same, more of the same. And I can remember one day in particular, I was behind my bedroom door, locked the door. My kids were probably 2 and 3 maybe. And I could hear them like calling for me and kind of crying outside the door. And I'm sitting on my bed just sobbing, like, I don't know how to do this. And it was kind of at that point where I was like, okay, something has to change. Something has to change. Like, none of this is going away. Like, something has to change. And I just started taking these steps of maybe, eating a little better, adding exercise in, or taking the boys out for walks more to get the fresh air. And I would notice, like, oh, as I do these things, like, I have a little more patience today. I'm able to handle what's going on a little bit better and a little bit better. And as I did that, I found my way into health coaching and kind of created a lot of, belief shifts around this, and things got better and things got better. But there was still this disconnect in my relationships with my kids, with my partner. And then I was in a conversation with another coach, and she goes, oh, I'm a parenting coach. And I was like, say what? Like, that just, like, in that moment, I just knew that was who I was supposed to be and how I was supposed to show up. And it began with my own journey. So I found a program where I went through basically my own transformation with my family first, kind of becoming aware that there was another way to parent. You call it peaceful parenting or conscious parenting, but there was another way to parent and interact with my kids. And I was just all in. And then as that evolved, my relationship with my partner evolved. So it kind of became this journey. And as I did that, I also realized that the disconnect that happens, and it happened for me, and I see in all, my clients, the moms in my, Facebook community, is we read, these books, right? Or we hear about peaceful parenting, respectful parenting, conscious parenting, and the tools and the insights, and it all sounds amazing. And so then we try to do the things so that we can have this feeling of calm or peace or joy. And yet there's this space between, like, what's lost is, again, this empowered motherhood, as I see it, is this journey back to you, basically. So it is the state of awareness, the journey of healing, so that we get to feel and embody this version of us that is underneath all of this stuff. And it's not about, like, if we try to Band-Aid on the tools without going on this journey, we feel that there must be something wrong with me. I can't do this. I can't figure this out. I hear from so many clients, like, I know what to do. I know what I want to do. I can't figure out how. So we go into it with, like, this agenda of, I'm going to get my kids to, cooperate or listen to me or do a certain way so that I can feel a certain way, versus we need to embody who we want to be, this state of being, before we have the proof that this works, quote unquote, before we have the proof that our kids are going to listen or cooperate. Like, it's embodying this version, and it's doing the healing work and being in this state of awareness to have the capacity to be present as we want to be. Because, like, I like to say, like, patience in parenting should never be the goal. Like, our goal should not be to have more patience, because if that's the goal, we're going to constantly be falling short. Because patience is a skill. We create the capacity to have patience. It's not something we have or we don't have. And our capacity for that is this journey of awareness.
And it's great. So Lori's saying, homesick today. This topic speaks volumes to me. Thanks for sharing. And you're welcome, Lori, because it is so relevant to so many moms. And a lot of times, by the time that people are coming and working with me, is that most of the time, their kids are grown. Like, I still work with some moms that are still at home, like that still have kids at home. But typically, a lot of the people that I do work with are the ones that they're already grown, or they're into high school, or they're like that kind of thing. So, and they've lost that version of themselves. And so, like, being able to tap into being able to do it when your kids are little makes a huge difference. And so, because otherwise it's so easy for us to be able to get lost. And like you said, no boundaries, trying to figure out how to be able to do all the things. And then again, if you're working on top of that, and not to say the moms that are not working don't have the same kind of pressures, because it's slightly different, right? So the pressures are different, but it doesn't mean that they're not having those same pressures. But I know that but most moms work out, right? So most of the moms are working outside of the home, and then they still have to keep the home. They still have to do all the different things. And so all those pressures, and again, you've got the perceptions of like, well, what are the neighbors going to think if the lawn isn't cut, right? So, oh, they didn't put out their garbage today. Like, what kind of parents are they? Their garbage is out, right? So really silly things. And the neighbors may not necessarily be noticing, but we think that the neighbors are noticing.
Sure. Right. Absolutely. We're so aware, we're hyper aware of doing a quote unquote good job, right? And what a good job looks like. And we have all of these beliefs and ideas. So when I talk about empowered motherhood, I see it as working on 4 pillars. So the 4 pillars that I work with clients through are, one is self-discovery, which is questioning our thoughts. Do the neighbors care that I mowed the lawn? And if they care, do I care that they care? Like, it's questioning all of those thoughts and beliefs. So my son, when he was 3 years old, he literally wore pajamas every minute of every day of his 3rd year. And again, in the beginning, it was like kind of trying to like wrestle him into clothes. And finally, I'm like, do I care that he wears clothes? Do I care if other people cares that he wears clothes? I really don't. Like, I truly don't. And if he's comfortable, wouldn't we all just wear pajamas all day? Like, and most of the time they were mismatched, but he was happy. And I was like, that's all I need. So it's questioning those thoughts and beliefs of we're supposed to show up in a certain way so that we get to wear that hat of being a good mom. Like, I often say, like, people say, well, how do I stop yelling so I can feel like a good mom? I'm like, no, you feel like a good mom, you own that. And then you'll naturally not need to yell as much. You won't go into those patterns, but it has to flip around. Yeah. So the second pillar in that is self-worth. And that is holding boundaries, learning to hold boundaries personally and with others. And then the third pillar is self-love. And this is not just the things we do, like self-care and the things we do for ourselves, but it's the way we talk to ourselves in our head. So that's self-love. And the last one is self-regulation, which is taking responsibility for our emotional state while letting go of the responsibility for others' emotional state. So when we balance these 4 pillars, we are showing up in a state of being that version of ourselves that we want to be. And then when we're off, all we have to say is, okay, where am I out of balance? Instead of, my kids are off the wall today and I'm losing my cool. Well, they may be off the wall and you don't have to lose your cool. So when we create this balance and this awareness, we can show up into what's happening around us in that state of being, feeling that peace and that inner calm from within, so that we can, interact with our children in a way that fosters cooperation, that builds trust, that has them cooperating. And I still am pleasantly surprised. Like, daily, I'll ask my, son to do something and he does it. And I'm like, oh, alrighty then. Whereas before it would have been like when I'm trying to force and control, because my partner will ask him the same question. And he'll be like, no. And he's like, and of course he goes into it's, disrespect or he's being defiant. And I'm like, I work really hard at the relationship I have with them so that they care what I'm asking. And there is a difference there. So when we, again, embody this place, we can create the change that we want versus trying to create the change we want so that we get to feel a certain way.
Yeah. And one of the things that I really think that is super important for us to be able to remember is that embodiment, right? So I think that's something that a lot of us tend to forget. So like you talked about that self-love and it not being just self-care, right? So self-love is not self-care. It kind of is, but it isn't, right? So that's a part of it. But it's like really looking in the mirror and saying, I love you, and really honestly meaning it, right? So that is something that so many women struggle with, is being able to say, I love you, and truly mean it. And so, because they're often defined by the things that they do and how they're being recognized. And then it's like, oh, okay, well then, like, that makes me feel really good. And then it takes away that self-worth as well, because then if you're not doing for others, then that means that you're no longer worthy. Right.
So, exactly. And also in self-care, the way I teach self-care, it's maybe we sit down to eat our dinner, right? Or we, cuddle with our kids before bed to have that connection time. Like self-care is the things that fill you up. It's not like the massages are amazing, the pedicures are great, and when we redefine what self-care really looks like and what we really desire, it can be, watching a show with your partner on the couch and cuddled up and laughing together. And that gets to be self-care when we define it. I like to say self-care is like the smallest things done with intention matter much more than the big things done without purpose.
Yeah.
And so when we can own that, we also can take off the pressure that this version of self-care that society has created, that it has to be these big things. And then we feel guilty for taking all that time away, or we don't feel worthy of, spending this money or taking it. But actually, it's the little things we're doing throughout the day that say, I love myself enough to sit down and have this meal.
Yeah.
And give myself that time. And then that gets to be a form of self-care.
And it makes all the difference in the world when we can actually have that time, right? So, and like you said, being able to, and some people don't think of self-care as that snuggling with your husband or your partner, or snuggling with your kids. And like bedtime reading for me was like, that was my favorite. And like my kids are now grown, and like I still really miss that before bed, going to climb into each of their beds separately and reading their book. And then when they both got old enough to a point where they were able to read and understand at the same level, then being able to have both of them curled up on both sides as we read. And then as they got older, one of them reading to the other, right? So so one of them would read and the rest of us would listen. And so it was just, and that was our like curled up on the bed kind of time before bed. And like those were like really special moments that I know that I cherish.
Every night. Every night. My boys are 8 and 9, and we still do it every night. And that's kind of their impetus for like getting the things done so that we still have time to have our cuddle time, as we call it. Do we have cuddle time tonight? And they're 8 and 9. And I love that. And it's so important. And then, scheduling time with my partner so that we have time together. So I think of self-care as like these 3 buckets. What do I need to feel energized, rested, and connected? And connected is to self, to others, and to something greater. And when we're filling these buckets in very small ways, we give ourselves that capacity for conscious awareness. And in that conscious awareness, we can step into that version of us that we want to be. We can recognize the beliefs and the stories that are driving us to give everything to others. We can recognize that our reactivity is coming from pushing, giving. Yeah. And we can kind of pull back. But when we're not doing those things, we're just constantly living in this state of reactivity that I've been in personally. That's no fun. And in so many ways just robs you of the joy of motherhood, and just kind of feels crushing every day. Like you're carrying this weight around that you're doing something wrong because you can't have enough patience. And then we go into the guilt and shame cycle, right?
Yeah.
So often. Yeah.
So, and it's just like so important for us to be able to do. Like, I remember when my kids were little, because like I said, mine are adults now. So, but when my kids were little, and then I also became a single mom when they were both little, and my kids are 18 months apart, so very close to yours. So like that's huge difference in, and like there's lots going on during that time frame. But and so I had gone to, with a parenting, I was in a parenting program. It was a parenting support program. And so one of the things that the facilitator at the time had said is, so is it important for you to have like a spick and span house, or is it important for you to spend time with your kids? And I was like, oh, because it was like, because that was my battle, was trying to make sure that everything looked well and all the floors were always clean and everything was done and like everything was in its place. And and then it was like, no, I want to be able to spend time with my kids. I really want to be able to spend time with my kids. So it was, everything shifted from that point on. It was like, I had to make those changes because I was still a working mom. So I was a working full-time mom, single mom, a new single mom, and having to deal with two little boys who were also missing their dad and needing to adapt to the change as much as we were trying to adapt to the change. So like there's all these different dynamics, and it was like, oh, no, I want to be able to spend time with my kids. Like, because right from the time that both of the boys were little, we started with the reading, right? So like they were just infants and we were reading the books, right? So, and I would do that as well as their dad, because both of us are really big readers. And so it was just always something that was really important. And so then making sure that we had that time and making sure that we did all those different things and making sure that we did go to the park and have some fun and do different things like that. So like those were things that meant, like you said, those were just little things, right? So going to the park, going for a walk with the kids, going to do these different things it's good for our own selves, but it's also good for them. So
absolutely. Right? Absolutely.
But yeah, so like this is great. So, and like I said, there's a number of different moms that struggle with this. So in terms of, so you talked about the 4 different pillars, but in terms of like a takeaway for moms, what is it that like what's the very first step do you think that they need to be looking at?
The first step is really compassion for where we are, right? We often are judging ourselves for where we are because we see the outcome that we desire, and then we don't know how to get there. So then we're caught in this constant pressure. So I think it's acceptance of where you are and forgiveness for who you don't yet know how to be. And when we can honor that part, we can say, okay, if I want to create change, if I want something to be different, what support can I look for? Or what podcast can I listen to? What book can I read that begins that support? But when we're in a state of judgment and comparison of ourselves, all that's doing is keeping us stuck right where we are, because we, reading something new feels like, well, I'll never be able to do that. So what's the point? And so when we can have that self-compassion and just start to question, like, what would it feel like to let go a little bit of the judgment? What would it feel like to let go a little bit of that comparison that I'm in? And then what support would I like? Maybe it's, like I said, listening to a podcast that you relate to or resonates with you. Maybe it's being in a Facebook community that resonates with you. Maybe it's having a friend that you can just talk to and honor your authentic truth. Because I think so often what we're doing is we're trying so hard to pretend that we're okay.
Yeah.
And especially right now with everything going on in the world, what if you also allowed yourself to be okay with not being okay all the time, not feeling okay, and honoring that part of you? Because accepting where we are doesn't mean we don't want more. Accepting where we are also isn't resigning ourselves to this is how it always has to be, but it's saying right now, this feels really hard. This feels heavy. And can I honor that feeling versus trying to put on that happy face to people please everybody else?
Yeah.
Right? So unconditional love for ourselves means honoring our truth without taking responsibility for others' reactions to that truth. So if a friend says like, hey, how are you today? And you're like, you know what? I'm just in it today. Today is a hard day.
Yeah.
And maybe that friend can handle it, maybe they can't, but you get to honor that truth and that part of you versus, oh yeah, I'm good. Things are good. When you're like crushing inside, you're like crumbling inside. It's when we're trying to put on that false face. And so my one insight would be start honoring your truth. Like, what is the truth for you today?
Yeah.
And allow yourself to be in that space. And the fact that we're not always going to have happy days, and is the goal really to always be happy? What if it's not? What if the goal is to just honor our feelings for what they are instead of always trying to put on that happy face to make others feel comfortable, to make others feel like we've got it all together?
Yeah. And I like how you say that, right? So to make others feel, right? So like, it's just so important for us to be able to like look into how we feel. So is there something in terms of people being able to work with you or being able to connect with your community? Do you, oh, excuse me. So do you have a community that you can recommend that people can connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a private Facebook community, Thrive in Motherhood. And it's really about me just showing up every day, offering insights and tools and kind of perspective shifts that can help us to create something different. So I'd love to invite listeners to join me in the Facebook community. Again, that's Thrive in Motherhood. And when you have the opportunity to get on my newsletter, if you desire, totally cool either way. And I also have a podcast, Thrive in Motherhood, which is really all about sharing perspective shifts and mindsets to thrive in motherhood, to fall in love with ourselves and motherhood again, to be able to honor all of the pieces of ourselves and to step into the version of ourselves that is filled with self-love and compassion. So again, the Facebook community is Thrive in Motherhood. I think you're still muted.
Yeah, I didn't want to cough so loudly while you were talking. So,
yeah.
Okay, so I was going to say that I'm going to go and find maybe. I'll find the group and I'll put it in the link. So I'll put in the link so that way there people can find it. And so Lori's saying that I'm truly going to work on recognizing my truth. And it is so important for us to be able to do that. And so, so thank you, Lori, for sharing that. Because a lot of people, like you said, Irene, is that there's so many women that hide behind I don't want anybody else to know how I'm doing, what I'm thinking or how I'm feeling. Right. So it makes all that difference in the world when we know that we're not alone. And I know that because back when my kids were little, we didn't have Facebook groups or that online. I think we had some different forums that we can actually connect to online, but it definitely wasn't a social media platform that we had. And so with me going to the parenting group, and we actually started because of a few moms that were struggling with being working moms, because a lot of the moms that were going to most of the programs weren't working. And so then they actually created a group specifically for us. So that way we actually had that support. So it was working moms and working dads and it was a mixed parenting group that we had in that particular case, because then it allowed my husband to be able to come when he came into the picture, because then it allowed us, because he was a stepdad, right? So then there's like all these different dynamics and these different things. And so just being able to understand that. So when we would say, oh my God, I can't believe that this was going on, and somebody else says, oh, wow, I thought that it was just me that was going through that. It's like, it is so, it just helps to empower you in the sense that like, oh my God, I'm not alone. Because a lot of times we really do feel like we're completely isolated and we're the only ones that are having that issue. And apparently I can't open Facebook so that I can't put that link. So we'll put that link in the comments.
Okay. Yeah, I remember like wanting to be a fly on another mom's wall, to be like, is it kind of the, craziness show that it is around here? And then I remember having a friend one time who was over for a play date, and I kind of snapped at my son. She goes, oh, you yell at your kids? I'm like the thought is like, we always think everybody else is, got it more together than us. And I think that's also one of the things with social media is that can be amazing for connections, but it can also really hold us in the comparison game.
Yeah.
And create that self-judgment and feeling like everyone else has it together. So that's just kind of, I think, what we all feel, that we're alone and we're the only ones struggling with these things, and having that community to come together to be vulnerable, to share that authentic truth, to have that support and just a safe space of love and compassion, so that when we fall into judgment, there's someone lovingly saying, I invite you to consider looking at it this way. And sometimes just those little tweaks can just create a big shift.
Well, and that was the same as like when, so like using the example of like the kids, because when you talked about like being behind the bedroom door with the kids banging on the door. And so one of the things that we ended up establishing with our household, because it was like sometimes was just completely chaotic for me. And it's like, I can't control what it is that they're doing. And so being able to say, okay, mom's going for a timeout. So being able to go in my room, and they knew that if I went in my room and closed my door, because my bedroom door was always opened otherwise. And so if I went in my room, closed my door, mom's on a timeout. Mom needs to like calm down and cool off, so that she can actually regroup, because that was one of the things that we had taught the kids, was that a timeout isn't because you're being punished. A timeout is because you need to have some time to be able to kind of get your act together, get yourself back together again. So mom would go on a timeout. So if I did snap or I did yell, the kids would say, Mom, I think you need to go on a timeout. Right? So and it was like, yes, you're right. I do need to go on a timeout. So like, give me 5, I will be back in a minute. Right? So because it's important for us to be able to recognize that. And that was something that my kids were able to learn, that we're human and we are going to like lose it. So like you said, the mom that says, oh my God, you yell at your kids, right? So like, it allows us to be able to know that we're not by ourselves.
And then I'm also the one showing up to own that and take responsibility and apologize, after I was feeling really frustrated because, and what, like you said, what that teaches them is like, oh, having emotions is a human experience.
Yeah.
I don't need to be perfect. And there can be so much power in the repair after the rupture, they call it, or after you lose your cool. Because it's not like, again, it's also not this expectation of perfection that I'm always showing up and being this, empowered mom. There are absolutely times where I'm still, losing it, or I snap. And then it's like, oh, wait a minute, take a breath here. What's really going on for me? And that's kind of owning that pillar of like self-discovery, which is questioning my thoughts, because we're never reacting to what our child is doing. We're never reacting to the present moment. We're reacting to the story within us. And when we react, our triggers are like a flashlight, like, oh, some healing needs to happen right here. There's a story here for you. You need to, you need to heal. And that's when we can see parenting as our like personal development journey versus needing our kids to behave a certain way or needing to be something. But parenting is the opportunity to heal ourselves, to understand ourselves on a deep level. And our children are these beautiful gifts that show us exactly where to look.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the things that I say all the time, is that my kids were my teachers, right? So like, my kids came in to be my teachers because they have taught me so much that I thought that I had thought I had it down pat before my kids came along. Yep. And then after my kids came along, I was like, yep, nope, that's not it.
Absolutely. Right? Yes. My older son, he's 9 now. He, as I like to say, he gives me opportunities for learning and growth daily. And, the challenges, early on, it was like, I had to become the mom he needed me to be. So it's not a state that we need to be fixed or there's something wrong with us or we don't know how to do this. It's kind of the unbecoming of who we thought we were so we can become who we're meant to be. Yeah. And our children are that catalyst, should we see them that way, to that growth and change.
Yeah. So it makes a huge difference. Yeah. So I want to thank you so much. Is there anything else before we end that you want to say to the viewers?
No, I just thank you for sharing your time here. I've just so enjoyed connecting with you and your audience, and I really appreciate the opportunity to share something that I am just so incredibly passionate about. So thank you.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And we will get the link added to the Facebook as well as to the YouTube, and so that you guys will have access to Irene, so that you guys can try and find her. And so thank you very much, Lori, for your feedback. Because like I said, a lot of times people will be watching and they stay quiet, right? And that's okay, because we know that they're still listening. And so, but it's nice to be able to hear people that actually are listening and having said and being able to share. So thank you, Lori. So we will talk to you guys next week. Have a great week. Bye for now.